Hi everyone! Today we're diving into a corner of the 40k universe that is just near and dear to my heart, as it is the perfect setting for the tragically haunting Blood Angels. We're talking about Baal, the homeworld of the Sons of Sanguinius. Now usually when you think of a Space Marine homeworld, you'd think of a place that's generally fortified and has a high amount of humans spread about, a bastion of strength, or great centers of culture. But Baal and its moons, Baal Primus and Baal Secundus, are less of a home and more of a perpetually radioactive graveyard that forgot to stay quiet. It's located deep within the Ultima Segmentum, within the Red Scar sector, and on paper it's classified as a death world and its moons as well as death worlds, despite them being moons. But its history is packed with some of the strangest creatures and entities that the universe has ever known. Before we even get to the Space Marines, we have to talk about the general vibes of the planet. Long before humanity showed up, Baal was inhabited by an unknown Xenos race. And things get even spookier from here, as they weren't just living there, they were tapped into the warp and they worshipped two entities. These are the Golden Angel and the Angel of Darkness, beings who were locked in a perpetual permanent cosmic tug of war. The crazy part is, when humans replaced those Xenos, the gods stayed with them, and eventually it is believed that they were taken by the Emperor when he was crafting the Primarchs, and both of them were used to create the core of the entity later known as Sanguinius. It's almost like the planet itself imprinted its duality into its inhabitants, past, present, and future. Every time a son or daughter of Baal does something heroic, the Gold Angel grows stronger. Every time one falls to the Black Rage or their own inner darkness, the shadow wins around and becomes more powerful than ever before. It is a cycle that has been spanning for eons, and lore suggests that even if humanity vanishes from existence, those entities are just going to wait for the next tenant to move to Baal. Now, Baal wasn't always a radioactive hellscape that made Mad Max's world look like the perfect vacation spot. Back during the Dark Age of technology, this world and its moons were actually beautiful, verdant paradise worlds. Baal itself was a desert, sure, but it was like the Mojave, a great vacation spot, especially when its moons were literal paradises. Verdant forests, beautiful grasslands, perfect mountains, and idyllic valleys. But then humanity did what it always does best. They had a civil war so catastrophic and so destructive, unleashing weapons seen nowhere else in the galaxy, that it makes the phrase overkill look like a joke. We're talking about ancient viral bombs, nuclear weapons, and biological entities created just to slaughter as many living creatures as possible. They didn't just kill people, they broke the ecosystem in such an extreme way, even with the technology granted to them by Belisarius' call, Baal still remains a radioactive hellscape. The atmosphere became such a soup of radiation and chemicals, the survivors of this tragedy became known as the Blood. Those who became too mutated essentially separated themselves from humanity, becoming cannibalistic abominations looking to devour the last shreds of these tribes that remained. And the tribes had to scavenge what was left over after the war, while wearing heavy radiation suits just to keep their skin from sloughing off, as radiation sickness and boils, pustules, along with mutation, became so normalized that only the gene seed of the Blood Angels would ever be able to adapt them into anything remotely resembling proper humanity. And these human tribes, in particular the Blood, struggled not to fight off the horde of mutants and beasts alike, but just to survive. This is a world Sanguinius, the great angel himself, the high on high of Primarchs, fell into when the Chaos Gods, with the aid of the universe's worst mother, scattered the Primarchs. And he didn't land in a palace or near some verdant gardens or even within the bounds of the city. He landed in a wasteland where the only thing cheaper than life was the dirt. Fast forwarding through the Horse Heresy and all the dealings with the Orcs, along with other Xenos, and we get to the modern nightmare that has most affected Baal and the Red Scar sector as a whole, Hive Fleet Leviathan, Imagine a literal tide of biological horrors descending upon the system and scouring it to the bone. It was so bad that even while working with the Necron, whose leader has the utmost respect for Sanguinius, so we know he has great taste in Primarchs, the campaign was still generally known as the devastation of Baal. The Blood Angels were almost wiped out, including their successors, which many of them came back and reorganized in near legion numbers, with Baal Primus being nearly rendered completely and utterly barren, almost totally scrubbed of life. But things get stranger. As the dust settled on Baal Primus particularly, they found skulls, millions upon millions, if not billions to trillions of them, arranged in effigy to Khorne by a being whose name is Kabanda, one of, if not the most powerful of the current greater demons of Khorne. And with these skulls, he engraved the sigil of Khorne as literal mountains of fused, melted, picked clean skulls. This mountainous sigil is so massive that it can be seen with the naked eye from the surface of Baal. Eventually, once the dust was settled from the actual devastation, they had to bombard their own moon with macro cannons just to blast the majority of this mountainous horde off the surface. Today, after massive reinforcements from Belisarius' Call and functionally making Dante a Legion Master and Warden of the North, Baal stands as the capital of Imperium Nihilus, the dark side of the galaxy which has been cut off from the Emperor's light. It is a dry, dusty rock which has a population of barely 122,000 people left, ruled by Lord Commander Dante. However, this lonely radioactive spatial sentinel stands at the edge of the end of humanity, and due to becoming the equivalent Terra of Nihilus, its population is now growing at a rate heretofore uncountable, as not only do the Blood Angels and many of their successors operate based out of Baal and its new space station, but also all the Dark Angels chapters seconded to Fleet Nihilus by Primarch Lionel Johnson, who are to operate out of this base and under the direct command of Lord Commander Dante. Now it's time to move on to the important places within Baal, the literal physical locations, not just from the geographical perspective, but from the historical one as well. As Baal isn't just desert, it is a graveyard with some of the most beautiful and terrifying architecture the entire Imperium has to offer. First, you have the Arx Angelicum. This fortress monastery houses the Blood Angels, and it's exactly what you'd expect. A massive Gothic cathedral fortress built right into the red rock of Baal. But then you have places with a more spiritual vibe. Take the Rubicara, also known as the Heart of Baal. It is a massive underground cavern filled with hexagonal pillars of pure bloodstone. And what makes this special is that bloodstone has a rather powerful psychic resonance, as it actually repairs itself as it is damaged and grows back every time it is harvested. This area is seen as the planet's own pulse, and it's a powerful one at that. If you go deep enough into the heart of the Blood Angels territory, you will eventually find the Holy Sepulchre, which houses a functioning golden sarcophagus made of eternally spinning molten gold within a stasis field, and this is a literal resting place of Sanguinius, and it is described as a massive, even to a space marine, translucent sphere of gold that glows with a constant, eerie luminescence. And this is the most sacred place for the Blood Angels chapter and for almost all of their successors. And because in the 41st millennium you just can't have nice things, countless of individuals have attempted to desecrate it in their own varying ways. From the Tyranids attempting to make their way deep into the sanctum, to even mutated Astartes made by Chief Apothecary Baal, called Blood Fiends, that actually broke into the tomb. It got so bad that Chapter Master Dante and the legendary Gabriel Seth couldn't stop the leader of the mutant, and it took the aid of a legendary sergeant named Raffin, wielding Mephiston's own Force Sword, to finally put down this abomination before it touched their Primarch's coffin. This place isn't just an area of peace, but it is also a focal point for the chapter's darker emotions, including grief and their unremittent rage. But looking up from here, orbiting around Baal is one of the most powerful orbital stations in existence. Here you have Skyfall, and this isn't just an orbital space station, it is an ultra-scale spaceport. To give you an idea of the scale of this thing, there is a statue of an angel atop of this massive shipyard that is 20 miles tall itself, and its sword alone is around another 7 miles long. This is something that you can constantly look up into space and see orbiting the world. Since the era Indominus, this spaceport has been turned into the absolute hub of Imperium Nihilus, as thousands upon thousands of tech priests are constantly crawling all over it, building new warships at a rate unseen since before the Horus Heresy. Warships of such great and terrible power as Baal's Fury. At this point, Skyfall functions as the capital building for half the galaxy, and it is meant to show everyone that even though the galaxy has been ripped asunder, humanity and the Blood Angels will continue to hold the line. Then you have the rest of the planet, and it's filled with names such as the Demetan Badlands, the Bloodwise Mountains, the Wastes of Enod, and these are places where the Blood Tribes try to survive between recruitment cycles. It's a landscape of red dust and radioactive winds, dotted with locations like the Verdus Isla that hint at the beauty that had been dead for over 10,000 years. And when you wrap it all together, you have a world that's constantly trying to kill everything on it. Not just through the radiation and the environmental hazards, but through what Blood Angels have noted is winds so powerful they can throw land raiders as if they were small boulders, and sandstorms so powerful they are able to strip layers of ceramite off of their armor. So we've looked at the main world and the star fortress orbiting it. Now we have to talk about the twin sisters, Baal Primus and Baal Secundus. Baal Primus, in comparison to its hot, dry, and arid twin, is a colder, meaner version. While being significantly smaller than its twin moon, the air is also drastically thinner, due to many of the abominations that have been left to populate this moon. The existence of anything on it is almost rancid. Back during the Dark Age of technology, this place was actually doing rather okay. It was part of a miniature golden era, but then the Age of Strife hit and warp storms rolled in, causing this led to a civil war, which was so climactic they even unleashed experimental weapons such as the Thirst Water, a being which is biologically, visually, and chemically almost indistinguishable from water, except rather than you drinking it, it will absorb the moisture off of any being that comes into contact with it. And the only limit to its thirst is how far away you are from it. During the devastation of Baal, the Blood Angels moved multiple samples of thirst water onto its twin moon and Baal proper, creating moats and trenches filled with this abomination, to the point that the Tyranids needed to make literal rafts of unending bioforms and form bridges where the thirst water could just not reach. Now, people on Baal Secundus during the Civil War basically told Baal Primus that they were the more important of the moons, and obviously people of Baal Primus took exception to this, resulting in the Civil War proper, along with a mass bombardment of nuclear arms. The detonations were so ungodly large that they even knocked out one of the orbital stations the size of a small city, leading it to crash directly upon the surface of Baal Secundus. And the impact didn't just kill people, it physically reshaped the moon, creating a mountain range called the Baalin's Necklace. Today, these mountains are just radioactive labyrinths filled with mutant horrors and abominations heretofore unseen since the darkest times of humanity's history. Even the hardiest scavengers avoid the necklace because it's basically a monument to the death of all things. Deep inside those wrecked mountains, there's a place called Felholm. It's a hall of said crash station, where the actual history of the Civil War was recorded at one point in time. It is one of the places where you can actually find the truth of how brothers turned upon brothers before Sanguinius ever arrived. This was found by an individual named Osten Galel, who not only was a captain of the Blood Angels, but would eventually form the Knights of Blood. He was the one who originally explored these ruins and wrote down the truth of what he saw. Functionally, this was a rather archaic form of library in the middle of a wasteland, proving that humanity's greatest enemy is often itself. But the real kicker is that after the devastation of Baal, there's functionally no one left on Baal Primus at all. When the Tyranids showed up, they didn't just eat the people. They rendered the moon functionally sterile, and despite the efforts of both the Blood Angels and the machinations of Khal, the moon resists being fully healed. This is in part because of the sigil of Khorne having been made out of Tyranid skull being on this moon, which quickly led the sons of Sanguinius and all of the Sanguinary Brotherhood to be so disgusted by the 8 pillars of blasphemy that they didn't send troops to clean it up. They didn't even send humans. They just continuously blasted and hammered away at it from orbit until the sigil of that demonic entity was erased. But this only ended up doing more damage to the moon, rendering it to a sterile grave. Now we get to the heart of it all. Upon Baal Secundus, or Balfora as the locals call it, is where Sanguinius actually landed. And it's the definition of bittersweet, as thousands upon thousands of years ago, this moon was a literal paradise, and it's hard to imagine seeing it now. However, there are still ruins and bits of technology scattered from a civilization that was far more advanced than anything the Imperium has ever seen before. But seeing as the Age of Strife happened, and humanity basically turned paradise into a hamster in a microwave, the ecosystem is so polluted with ionizing radiation and nuclear fallout that if you walk outside without a thick lead-lined suit, you're basically a dead man walking, and even those who take the greatest of precautions will still end up heavily scarred and mutated by cancerous tumors. It is an unforgiving world that produces equally harsh yet unforgiving people. Living upon Baal Secundus isn't just about dodging radiation, it's about surviving everything, including your neighbors. You have these massive beings known as fire scorpions that are exactly as terrifying as they sound. But the real nightmare is the mutants. These are the descendants of living humans whose DNA just gave up under the pressure of the fallout. For a long time, these cannibalistic mutant tribes actually outnumbered the pure humans, treating them as a food source. However, that would change when Sanguinius, the great angel, fell from the stars. He led a war of extinction upon them, and while they aren't the threat they used to be, the memory of the horror that they caused is baked into the culture of the people of the blood. This is a world where you're either a predator or your dinner. The most famous spot on this world is actually Angel's Fall. This is a literal location where Sanguinius' gestation capsule slammed headlong into the dirt 10,000 years ago, and it is the only place where the Blood Angels actually bother to interact with the locals on a persistent basis. The adolescent boys from the scavenger tribes actually gather here for what is essentially the most violent sports tournament in the entire galaxy. However, they aren't played for trophies, they're fighting for a chance to become an angel. They battle the terrain, they battle the predators, and most of all, they battle each other in these brutal games just to prove that they are worthy of the angel's grace. If you survive the fire scorpions, the thirst water, the ionizing radiation, and the malicious attacks from other aspirants, you might just get the chance to leave the radioactive rock. But even after all that history, Baal Secundus almost met its end during the devastation of Baal, when the moon was crawling with endless scores of Tyranids, and for a minute there, it seemed that humanity's duration on Secundus would be extinguished. However, after the Indominus Crusade arrived and the cleanup efforts happened, a rather strange moment of transition occurred as the ancient tribes were watching newer, larger angels descend from the sky to save them, while what was not evacuated prior to the devastation itself. Baal Secundus is still standing, scarred and radioactive as ever, serving as the ultimate testing grounds for the sons of Sanguinius, while Baal proper has been revitalized, actually gaining some areas of greenery, sparse as though they may be. Now, we've talked about the world itself and its history. Now it's time to talk about its ecology, because this is where things get genuinely terrifying. Evolution on Baal Secundus didn't just take a wrong turn. It took a wrong turn into a dark alley and started swinging. You've got Baalite fire scorpions, which are these massive, bug-shaped nightmares, twice the height of a grown man. And they don't just sting you, they inject you with an acidic toxin so potent it can even melt through Astartes' armor within a solar second. Then you have the dreaded thirstwater. This stuff is a carnivorous, plant-like organism that functionally looks, sounds, and is chemically almost identical to water, that just latches onto you and literally drains every last drop of water from your cells, as it dehydrates you and consumes you that way, faster than even the hive mind could adapt to what it was. This is a literal world where the water drinks you, and the local wildlife consists of things like blood eagles and giant spiders along with them. This isn't a desert, it is a desert-shaped, breathing death trap. Despite the fire scorpions and the thirst water, the people of Baal have managed to carve out a semi-functional society. You have places like Celltown, which are exactly like what the name suggests. A rugged trading hub where tribes come to swap artifacts, scavenge goods, and information on ancient ruins. This is where you will see the contradiction of Baal at its greatest. These people are considered by most of the galaxy to be feral nomads, yet they are donning hyper-advanced radiation suits, carrying and reading Geiger counters, and driving around in heavy vehicles that put some of the technology on Terra to shame, just to stay alive. They are basically the greatest scavengers in the known galaxy who have managed to live on the wreckage of a god-tier civilization and draw what they could from it. Then there's the Great Salt Waste, a dried-up ancient seabed that's arguably the most brutal stretch of desert on the moon. If the radiation doesn't get you here, then the literal emptiness will. But this has led to a people that are uniquely distinct from baseline humans. Most of the survivors are descendants of these ancient wars who either devolved into sickly cannibalistic mutants corrupted by the vile weapons and the fallout, or the one singular group that refused to let go of their humanity. These are known as ones of pure blood, and this name was often shortened to the Blood. They are people who maintain a noble, enlightened outlook on humanity despite the literal hellscape that is constantly trying to kill them. After the Horus Heresy, they even expanded back to Baal Prime, just to keep their culture alive, and in order to expand their population so the chapter may recruit from them. They are often seen as noble savages by the rest of the Imperium, holding aloft a sliver of dignity and a rather wide base of knowledge from the dark age of technology. When the tribes aren't fighting for survival, they will gather upon a place known as Mount Seraph. It is a massive, naturally created amphitheater carved straight into the mountain, which serves as neutral ground where the tribes can meet, negotiate, and interact with each other. This is a place of tradition and law, and in a world that is usually filled with neither, it is a veritable paradise. Looming over this all is the Angel's Leap, and this is a giant statue of Sanguinius looking over Angel's Fall, which reminds every tribesman that there is always a way out, a way to become something more than just a scavenger, waiting until the cancer that every last resident of Baal is stricken with takes your life. Many a youngling has aspired by looking towards this great statue, including Commander Dante, and aspired for greatness beyond that of the mortal human flesh. And from this view is where many will start their journey, the moment where the line between human survivor and demigod become blurred in the most vampiric way possible. As every generation, the Blood Angels send these flying chariots, which are actually heavily modified Thunderhawk gunships, to the tribes on the moons, and they will announce it is a time of challenge, which is a starting gun for a nightmare. If you're a youngling on Baal Secundus, you will be given the option to either remain or to trek across a radioactive, bomb-blasted desert that is actively trying to melt you just to reach Angel's Fall. Most are not even able to make it that far, but for the 50 or so who do, survive the games, the tournaments, and the challenges upon Angel's Fall, their reward is a ticket to the Arx Angelicum. And here's the thing, at this point, these younglings aren't the beautiful angels you see in frescoes. They are stunted, malnourished, covered in radiation sores and cancerous boils, often dealing with early stages of malignant tumor all throughout their beings. They're walking cancerous Swiss cheese. Once they get to the fortress monastery, this is where the real strangeness begins. They will be brought to a massive chapel for a vigil. Here, a sanguinary priest will bring out the Red Grail. Then they are told to drink the literal blood of Sanguinius. And in a universe where psychic resonance is a real thing, this isn't a metaphor. As soon as they drink, they are pushed into passing out. And while they are unconscious, they're moved into a chamber known as the Apothecarian, where the gene seed of the chapter is implanted. But they don't just wake up and start training. No, they are moved into another massive storage facility the size of a city, and they're placed within these gigantic golden sarcophagi and hooked up to life support for an entire year, all while being submerged head to toe in vats of blood, as they're intravenously fed nutrients along with the blood of the angel, while their bodies are being violently and drastically reshaped from the inside out. During this year-long slumber, there aren't just growing extra organs and muscle mass, though that's happening too, and in a way so intense, many of them die in the process, their bodies literally giving out under the stress of the most mutagenic gene seed the Imperium has ever known. However, the ones who survive the physical changes also have to deal with a mental battle. Because the gene seed of Sanguinius carries his genetic memories, these aspirants are now literally floating in isolated containment chambers in the shape of golden coffins, set apart from the rest of the world, not only for their own safety, but for the safety of all others. They're seeing what the great angel saw. It's a spiritual bonding process that basically weaves the Primarch's soul into theirs. But there's a catch. Those dreams never go away. They haunt these warriors for the rest of their lives, as it is the first step upon the road of the Black Rage. When the sarcophagi finally hiss open and the aspirants step out transformed, these stunted, sickly younglings from rad deserts are gone, and in their place stand tall, superhumanly powerful figures with sleek, supernaturally beautiful features, which can actually overwhelm the minds of those who gaze upon them. But beneath the beautiful eyes and the sharp teeth, there is a darker nature. They've basically been sculpted into the image of Sanguinius, their muscles tempered like steel, and their senses sharpened to a point greater than anything a normal human could ever comprehend. And they're finally moved out from this massive compound as they can join the scout companies. However, this is just what Baal was. In the aftermath of the devastation of Baal and the ripping asunder of the galaxy, the Blood Angels didn't just survive, they were forced to evolve, as Reboot Guilliman brought with him scores upon scores of Primaris Space Marines, bigger, stronger, and more genetically stable warriors. Upon this, Dante would be named Regent of Imperium Nihilus, basically making him the king of the dark side of the galaxy. The Blood Angels not only rebuilt the Arx Angelicum, but they inducted every single surviving aspirant and genetically viable human into the Blood Angels, thanks to the Blood Angels gene seed being able to allow the ascension of mortals at a significantly more advanced age than that of normal gene seed. The Baal system is still a scarred radioactive wasteland, but now it is the capital of a new, desperate war for survival, where the sons of Sanguinius and their allies have rebuilt the world into a bastion whose defenses are only surpassed by those of Terra itself. And under Reboot Guilliman's commands, they have actually began to terraform pockets of the world into greener pastures in order to better supply humanity and advance them into a new glorious age. And that's the story of Baal. It's an incredibly important world trapped in a bittersweet cycle where it is built up only to be turned into a radioactive hellscape, which is then built back into a peak of humanity, only to be brought back low due to extragalactic abominations. And once again, they are rebuilding it back into the peak of humanity. And it is likely that it will be brought back low by some other abomination, or even humanity itself for the millionth time. It is a place where you are born in the dirt of a nuclear wasteland, only to trek through its deserts, which are filled with things that want to drink your blood or devour your very soul. Thank you for staying with me while I dive deep into one of my favorite factions of the 40k universe.